Hi, my name is Yvonne Gorman, and I have thyroid cancer. So, because of this development, I've chosen for my wellness project to talk about thyroid cancer and what I've learned since developing the disease. For instance, thyroid cancer is the highest incidence of cancer being discovered today. The rates have quadrupled since the 70s and then doubled since the 90s. So basically what I'm wanting to find out is, what is it that has changed in our environment that's causing this increase? And what can you do to prevent from becoming one of these statistics? So let's start with the basics. First of all, what is the thyroid? Before I was diagnosed with cancer, I really didn't know. Like everything else, we tend to take things for granted until there's a problem. The thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland that is located in the lower part of your neck. The function of this gland is to secrete hormones. The main hormones that are released by the thyroid is triiodothyronine, which they abbreviate as T3 for obvious reasons, and thyroxine, which is abbreviated as T4. These thyroid hormones deliver energy to the cells of the body. They are also there to influence our metabolism, our growth and our development, our body temperature, and they're crucial for brain development in infants and children. So you might be asking yourself right now, okay, I have a thyroid. How do I know if I'm having issues with my thyroid? Basically, some of the most common symptoms are difficulty losing weight, brain fog, hair loss, fatigue, hormonal imbalance, dry skin, digestive issues, a low libido, and depression. Starting in July of 2012, I had several of these symptoms, and I went to my doctor because I just wasn't feeling well. And instead of being diagnosed as a thyroid issue, I was sent to a mental health professional who decided that I was depressed, which I thought was crazy because I wasn't sad, I wasn't suicidal, I felt fine, I'm studying psychology. And so one thing that I think is really interesting about this as someone who is wanting to go into the mental health field is to maybe this is something that we need to really know about. I was prescribed medications, which helped a little bit with the fatigue, but I remember thinking, I'm just too happy to be depressed. And little did I know, it was because I was having issues with my thyroid. This year alone, there will be 62,980 new cases of thyroid cancer diagnosed in 2014. 2 out of 3 of these individuals will be less than 55 years of age. 10% will be children and teens. 47,790 will be women. 15,190 will be men. No one really knows why there is such a high rate with women versus men. However, those rates still have increased from those that were in 7. No one can really explain why. Of those that are diagnosed, nearly 2,000 will lose their battle and will die to the disease known as thyroid cancer. So what can you do to prevent yourself and others that you love from getting this type of cancer? First of all, let's talk about the risks. One of the risk factors for thyroid cancer is the diet. The thyroid needs iodine in order to produce the hormones, and iodine is typically obtained through our diet. So if you're eating a diet that's lacking in iodine, it increases your risk for developing this type of cancer. So right now, maybe you're questioning, well, how do I know how much iodine I'm supposed to have? Basically, it depends upon your age and some of your life circumstances. This handy chart here shows from birth to 6 months, about 110 micrograms. Infants in 7 to 12 months, 130 micrograms. Children 1 to 8, 90. Children 9 to 13, 120. Teens 14 to 18, 150. Adults 150. And then this is what I thought was interesting. Pregnant teens and women need 220 micrograms. And breastfeeding teens and women also need an increase of 290 in my personal history, I've experienced a lot of pregnancy and a lot of breastfeeding and never knew anything about increasing my iodine. And it makes me wonder now if that isn't part of why maybe I developed this disease. Iodine is found naturally in some foods. It's also added to salt. It used to be in all salts. One thing that I noticed when going to the grocery store, though, is the lower cost salts are no longer iodine. As you can see, I went to Walmart and I got this great value iodized salt. Don't know if you can see on here, it says right there in really big letters, this salt does not supply iodide, a necessary nutrient. And I wonder how many people are saving money and buying cheaper salt and missing out on this nutrient that they must have. Like I said, it used to be in all salts, and now you have to look for it. But that's one of the easiest ways to get it, is that it's naturally found in salt. It's also found in a fish, like cod and tuna, seaweed, shrimp, any other seafood. Pretty much anything coming out of the sea is going to be rich in iodine. All dairy products are high in iodine. Milk, yogurt, cheese, also products made from grains, like breads and cereals, are major sources of iodine in our diet. All of our breads have an iodine added to it because it makes the dough easier to handle. But the benefit of that is then we get that iodine for our diet. Fruits and vegetables may also, depending on the soil that they were grown in, if they're able to pull that nutrient from the soil, then they will also be rich in that. Like I said before, iodized salt is the easiest way. Processed foods, though, which Americans are eating more and more and more of, like canned soups and Hamburger Helper, they never contain iodized salt. So part of the problem is we have a lot of things being eaten that are no longer high in iodine. Another cause for thyroid cancer is radiation. This is kind of a no-brainer. X-rays are one way that we get exposed. And if you think about it, when you've gone in to get an x-ray, sometimes they'll give you that lead shield that comes down and across your chest and over your abdomen, and it leaves your thyroid wide open. It's more common in people who have had radiotherapy treatment in the neck area at a young age. Children and infants who are exposed to radiation in the neck area, it may not show up for 10 to 30 years, but it does increase their risk of developing thyroid cancer. A couple of other things that make sense looking at the environment is our cell phones and our microwaves. Microwaves, of course, came out into the 70s when we saw the first big increase in thyroid cancer detected. And although the radiation is a non-ionized radiation, because a lot of the cooking that we do in the microwave we do in plastic, the radiation can cause the plastic to leach toxic materials into the food, which we then consume. And this could be part of the reason that we saw this huge jump in the 70s. The second jump that we saw in cases was in the 90s, and that is when cell phones became popular. There are three main reasons that people are concerned about cell phones. Number one, they emit a radio frequency that although it is low, it still can affect the tissues that is closest to. Now you think about when you hold your phone, you're talking on your phone, and it's right there, right by your neck. I know that when my husband was deployed to Iraq, I slept with my phone on my shoulder because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss a call from him. Cell phones emit radio frequency energy waves, and so the tissues that are closest to that phone are what are going to absorb that energy, and that can cause the cells to mutate. They estimate right now that there are 303 million cell phone subscribers in the United States as of 2010. I'm sure that's even higher now. And the phones that we're using now are constantly searching for signal, and even when you're not using the phone, it's emitting radiation. So I have to wonder, is this part of the reason why I have thyroid cancer? The third thing, as far as radiation, is survivors of nuclear accidents It's been a huge eye-opener after Chernobyl. There were so many more children and teenagers that were diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Also, those who are survivors of atomic reactions. So, in Japan, where we just had the nuclear meltdown 3 years ago, they are now seeing what they're calling cancer clusters, and that is diagnosis of more people with thyroid cancer in areas that were closest to that meltdown. Also, people who live in Utah, where they developed the nuclear weapons used against Japan in World War II, there are people there, and they noticed an increase in cancers there. In Japan, the government has tested about 375,000 children, and in those 375,000 children, they found 33 who within the last 3 years have been diagnosed with thyroid cancer. The crazy thing about that is there's usually about 1 or 2 children per million diagnosed with thyroid cancer. So that is definitely an increase. And the government will tell us that there's really no proof that the radiation is what's causing the cancer. But it seems obvious to me. This is one we'll have to wait on to get the for sure diagnosis. In Chernobyl, we're somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 cases of children that were exposed to the radiation. And it wasn't just the radiation that they were exposed to. They continued to eat and drink the foods that were grown in that area, the milk that came from the cows that were exposed to that radiation. And so it has obviously increased the risks of thyroid cancer there. So you're probably thinking, okay, I don't live near Chernobyl or Japan. However, scientists are now noticing that there is a wave of radiation that's headed into the United States across the Pacific from Japan. And it will be interesting to see if this does change the amount of thyroid cancer cases that are diagnosed in the United States. So, now that we've talked about your risks, radiation, increase in iodine in your diet, not microwaving your food, and not spending too much time with your cell phone, how can you lower your risk? Well, eat a healthy diet. You hear it over and over and over again, but a balanced diet is important to our health. Our bodies were created to need nutrients, and that's how we get them by a varied diet. Not processed food, not microwaved food. The other thing is to avoid radiation. Don't get unnecessary x-rays. And if you do, make sure that they now have a cuff that goes around the neck to protect the thyroid. And so I feel like that's a very important thing. Before I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, I lived a pretty healthy lifestyle. I have 10 children and a lot of life to live. And once I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, it changed my life, because I realized that my wellness was not in balance, and that's what led to this. And so in taking this class and learning about the wellness model and the 8 different dimensions of wellness, I have learned where I'm lacking and what I need to improve. And the way that this has affected my life, it has affected almost every area of wellness. Physically, before, I had a jawline. It was a very nice jawline. I had long and beautiful hair, and I felt good. I was able to play with my children. I was able to keep up with the house and my homework, and I didn't have, any problems with that. I began, like I said, in the summer of 2012, feeling tired and not being able to function. I noticed tons and tons and tons of hair loss during my pregnancy, which is unusual because you don't usually lose hair when you're pregnant. It was falling out so bad that I went from having hair, as you can see, down to my rear. I decided to chop it off and donate it to Locks for Love, because I was just throwing away handfuls of hair a day. And so now I'm growing it back out, and it's doing better, and it's not falling out anymore. But it's a life changer. Physically, I have swelling still. I have scars from my surgery. My first surgery, they found the cancer here on my trachea. It wasn't even in the thyroid. They went in and they removed it. That was 2 months after I delivered my last baby, who is now 8 months old. And they determined that it was papillary carcinoma. And this affected how I felt. It affected me socially. I had, not that I'm a terribly vain person, but I had this scar that I'd never had before. I had swelling. It didn't look pretty, and I didn't want to go out of the house. Emotionally, I was very emotional. I cried a lot. I didn't want to think about dying. I didn't want to think that I would have to leave my children before they were grown. After the first surgery, they determined what cancer it was, because at that time they had done a biopsy on my thyroid and it came back perfectly fine. And they found that nodule on my trachea and they couldn't tell what it was. Upon taking it out, pathology determined it was papillary carcinoma. I then went in and had my thyroid removed plus 15 lymph nodes and had a drain put in my neck. This was fun. If I didn't want to go out of the house before, I really didn't want to go out of the house after this. I had a 4-month-old at this time, and this drain that was in my neck, oh my goodness, was not fun at all. But I decided early on that I was going to have a good mental outlook on this. I was going to battle this, and I wasn't going to just give up and feel sorry for myself. So I kept people on Facebook updated. I did help increase my social, if I wasn't going to go out of the house, I could at least talk. This was before my surgery. This was going home after my surgery. And I let people know, please pray for me. I'm doing okay. Spiritually, it was so nice to have people praying for me, knowing that I was going to be okay. And so here I am. Now, financially, so far the bills rolling in have totaled up to $45,000. Thankfully, we have health insurance through the military, and so our cost is actually very low. But I can only imagine what other people going through this might have to experience. Occupationally, it has affected my schooling. Intellectually, with a brain fog, it's hard to really do anything. But I'm taking it one day at a time, and I hope through learning about this, I can help other people avoid this. It's been a great class. Thank you, and I hope you learned something new today.